Welcome back to Bloodstained Backstories, the podcast where we step into the shadows of real-life crime, uncovering the stories that prove evil doesn't always hide. Sometimes it performs. Today's case is not just about murder. It's about obsession, about narcissism, and about a man who believed notoriety was worth any price, even a human life. In 2012, the world watched in horror as graphic videos surfaced online, sparking an international manhunt that unfolded in real time across news outlets, message boards, and social media feeds. At the center of it all was Luka Magnotta, a man desperate to be seen, heard, and remembered. But behind the headlines and shock value was a victim whose life was reduced to a spectacle, and a crime that forced us to confront a disturbing question. What happens when violence meets fame-hungry ambition in the digital age? This is Inside the Luka Magnotta Case, Fame, Violence, and Betrayal. Luka Magnotta was actually given the name of Eric Clinton Kirk Newman at birth on July 24, 1982, but he would change his name to Luka Magnotta on August 12, 2006. He was born in Scottsboro, Ontario, and he was the first of 3 children. His father was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 1994 and divorced his mother. His mother was obsessed with cleanliness, and she would often lock her kids out of the house to keep it clean. She even put their pet rabbits outside in the freezing cold. After their divorce, Luka would go to live with his grandparents. Luka was diagnosed with schizophrenia and received a disability allowance, which she would supplement with prostitution and being an escort. He also worked as a stripper, and in 2003, he appeared in a few gay pornographic videos. In 2005, he appeared as a pinup model on Toronto's Fab magazine under the name of Jimmy. In March of 2007, he filed bankruptcy owing $17,000 in various debts, and it was fully discharged in December of 2007. After his arrest, some media labeled him as a porn star, but further reporting showed his work as a porn actor was anything but prolific or high profile. Over a 5-year period, he shot less than a dozen videos. A staff member of Internet Adult Film Database said not even the porn industry was much interested in him. He tried modeling but did not have success in that either. It seemed Luka was desperate to be famous. He was an unsuccessful competitor in Out TV's reality series Cover Guy in 2007. He auditioned for the Slice Network's own Plastic Makes Perfect in February of 2008, and he had multiple cosmetic surgery. Luka, over the course of several years, created numerous profiles on different social media websites and discussion forums in order to plant claims about himself. The police stated that he set up at least 70 Facebook pages and 20 websites under different names, and he would use them to sing his own praises, attack people he did not like, and even spread false information about himself in order to attract attention. In 2007, a rumor had emerged that Luka was in a relationship with Karla Homolaka, who was a high-profile convicted murderer. In the interview, Luka denied the relationship rumor. He also repeatedly denied that he planted hoaxes. In the early 2000s, Luka had a lover of Nina Arnstald, who in 2012 described him as a manipulative liar and often self-destructive. A reporter who interviewed Luka in 2007 said he found Luka to be troubled and suspected. At the time, Luka had made up rumors about himself to get attention. In 2012, a transgendered woman who had dated Luka for a short time said that Luka was obsessed with becoming famous, and he looked at Homolaka and her accomplice Pearl Bernardo as role models. In 2005, Luka was convicted of 1 count of impersonating and 3 counts of fraud. He was using his birth name at the time, and the fraud was against Sears Canada, The Brick, and 2001 audio video. He had convinced a mentally disabled young woman to apply for credit cards and then would use them for himself. He purchased over $10,000 worth of goods, taking advantage of the woman. He was accused of sexually assaulting the woman, but the charges were dropped. He did plead guilty to the rest of the charges and received a 9-month conditional sentence and 12 months probation. It was noted at the time by the court that Luka had significant psychiatric issues, and it was also noted that he did not take any of his medication. Luka made a post on YouTube in 2010 in which he titled it, "One Boy, Two Kittens." In the video, he deliberately suffocated 2 kittens by putting them in a plastic bag and then used a vacuum cleaner to suck the air out of the bag. He would publish a second video of himself drowning a cat in a bathtub. He even went as far as publishing a third video, this time feeding a cat to a python. A private Facebook group in January of 2011 identified Luka as the person in the videos. A $5,000 reward was offered by animal rights activist groups to bring Luka to justice. Luka was identified by the internet community and reported him to authorities. They were afraid that after he posted acts of severe animal cruelty, he might be a threat to humans. In a 2019 Netflix docuseries, Don't F With Cats, Hunting an Internet Killer, this chronicled the investigation that made the internet community figure out who he was. Toronto's police, in connection with the video, started investigating Luka. They had received a complaint from the Ontario Society for Prevention of Cruelty of Animals, the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in Britain, the American FBI, and the Montreal Police were all contacted because Luka traveled a lot. Jun Lin, who is also known as Justin Lin, was born on December 30th, 1978. He came to Canada from Wuhan in 2010, wanting to start a new life and study computer engineering. He was registered as an international student and an undergraduate in engineering and computer sciences at Concordia University in Montreal, Quebec in 2012. On May 1st, 2012, he moved to the Griffintown area apartment with a roommate. Lin had at some point been married to a woman even though he was gay, but they would later become divorced. While in Canada, he lived with another Chinese man. His father had met his boyfriend, but Lin never revealed his sexual orientation to his family in China. The relationship with his partner ended shortly before he was murdered because his family was pressuring him to settle down and marry a woman. Lin began using Grindr and other web applications to meet men after the breakup with his boyfriend. Luka had posted an ad on Craigslist proposing sex and bondage, with which Lin responded. On May 24, 2012, was the last time anyone saw Lin. His friends did report getting a text message from his phone at 9 p.m. The next day, he did not show up for work, and his boss became suspicious. On May 27, 3 of Lin's friends entered his apartment, and there were no signs of him. They would report him missing on May 29th. On the night of May 24th, a surveillance camera showed Lin and Luka entering Luka's apartment, and Lin was very much alive. An 11-minute video titled One Lunatic, One Ice Pick was uploaded to bestscore.com on May 25, 2012. This was just one day after Lin had been seen alive on surveillance footage. The video showed a naked man, later identified as Lin, tied to a bed frame, being stabbed over and over with what was thought to be an ice pick, but was later identified as a screwdriver. He was shown getting stabbed with a kitchen knife, and he was dismembered following acts of necrophilia. The perpetrator used Lin's severed arm to masturbate. The video used some still pictures and was edited from several clips. The perpetrator used a knife and fork to remove several other pieces of flesh and give it to a dog to chew on the body. The Canadian authorities were able to identify a more extensive version of the video and said that cannibalism may have been performed. It was established later that Lin's throat had been slit and he was already dead when the film was shot. It was not an actual killing in the video. The video in the first few seconds showed a man that was naked and bound writhing while there was another man in a hoodie straddling him. The investigators were able to determine that the man in those images was not Lin, but another man that had been to Luka's apartment and was fortunately not killed. According to the police video that had been sent to bestscore.com by Luka, and the owners posted it online. Using a passport with his own name, Luka booked a round-trip ticket from Montreal to Paris within several hours after killing Lin. An attorney from Montana tried to report the video to the Toronto Police, his local sheriffs, and the FBI on May 26, 2012, but the reports were dismissed by officials. Viewers from the Best Score website attempted to report the video. Later, the police confirmed it as authentic, and they identified the victim in the video as an Asian male with the same person whose body parts who were sent to Ottawa. On May 29, 2012 at 11 a.m., a package containing a left foot was delivered to the national headquarters of the Conservative Party of Canada. The package was stained with blood and it had a very foul smell. It was also marked with a red heart symbol. Another package at this time containing a left hand was intercepted in the Canadian post-processing facility, and it was addressed to the Liberal Party. A decomposing torso was found inside a suitcase by a janitor. It was left in a pile of garbage in an alleyway behind a building in the Snowdon area of Montreal. The janitor saw the suitcase on May 25th, but due to the large amounts of garbage, it had not been picked up that day. Police searched the scene and discovered the human remains along with bloody clothes and papers that identified who the suspect was. There were also sharp blunt objects in the back of the alleyway. Surveillance camera footage that was inside the building showed an individual bringing numerous garbage bags outside. The images on the surveillance footage matched the captured video of the suspect at a post office. The police searched Luka's apartment at 11:33 p.m. that he was renting on Dakari Boulevard. He had pages written up to June when he moved 4 months prior. They found the apartment mostly empty, but they did find blood on different items. Blood was on the mattress, the refrigerator, and a table, as well as the bathtub. Inside the closet, written in red ink, was a message that said, "If you don't like the reflection, don't look in the mirror, I don't care." It was confirmed that the body parts collected so far all belonged to the same individual who would later be identified as Jun Lin. Luka, who had fled by this time, was identified as a suspect in the case. The package that was sent to the Conservative Party contained a note stating that 6 body parts had been distributed and the perpetrator would kill again. The other 3 packages also contained notes, but due to a fear of a possible copycat killer, the police did not release the contents of the note. A package containing a right foot was delivered on June 5, 2012 to the St. George's School. Another package containing the right hand was delivered to the Falls Creek Elementary School in Vancouver, British Columbia. Both packages were sent to Montreal. Some of the packages were wrapped in pink tissue paper. One of the packages was labeled with a note saying, "Roses are red, violets are blue, the police will need dental records to identify you, bitch." 4 limbs and the torso were matched to Lin using DNA samples from his family on June 13, 2012. His head was found on July 1st at the edge of a small lake and park in Montreal. The police had received an anonymous tip to look for it there. Peter Lambrinkanos headed the investigation in Canada. There was an arrest warrant for Luka issued by the Service of Police in Montreal, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police upgraded to a Canada-wide warrant, and he was accused of the following crimes. 1. First-degree murder. 2. Committing an indignity to a dead body. 3. Publishing obscene material. 4. Mailing obscene, indecent, immoral, or scurrilous material. And 5. Criminally harassing Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper and several unnamed members of Parliament. The Canadian authorities requested Interpol issue a red notice for Luka on May 31st, 2012. Several days before his arrest, his name and photo were promptly displayed on Interpol's website at the homepage, and the red notice put out that Luka was to be pending extradition back to Canada by any Interpol member state. On May 25th, prior to the red notice, Luka, using a passport in his own name, booked a round-trip ticket for late from Montreal to Paris. His cell phone signal once he arrived in Paris was traced to a hotel in Bangladesh, but he had left by that time that police arrived. In the hotel, police found pornographic magazines and an air sickness bag. They also found that Luka had a fake passport at the hotel going by the nickname of Kirk Trammell. Luka had previously visited Paris in 2010 and had contacts there. The police were following a large frame man who had been in contact with Luka. He stayed with another man for 2 nights but did not realize who he was until after he left. At the Bangladesh coach station, Luka boarded the Eurolines bus bound for Berlin in Germany. Luka was at an internet cafe in Nuclein district on June 4, 2012, reading stories about himself when he was apprehended by Berlin police. Before admitting who he was, he tried to give fake names, though fingerprint evidence identified who he was. On June 5, 2012, Luka appeared in Berlin court. He did not oppose his extradition by the German officials. Luka agreed to a simplified process, and they had sufficient evidence to keep him in custody until he was extradited. Luka was delivered to Canadian authorities in Berlin on June 18, 2012. He was flown to Mirabel International Airport north of Montreal aboard a Royal Canadian Air Force CC-150 Polaris. The government thought it would be necessary for military transport due to safety concerns using a commercial flight and potential legal difficulties if the plane needed to be diverted to another country. At the Rivière de Paris detention center, he was placed in solitary confinement. In China, some believe the murder was racially motivated, as it was widely reported. In just slightly over a year, it was the second highest profile murder case of a Chinese student. Public safety in Canada was questioned by some of the Chinese, and Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper was pleased that the subject was in custody. He congratulated the police forces on their good work on apprehending Luka. Bob Rae, the interim Liberal Party leader, said that the Canadians should mourn the victim and not in any way, shape, or form celebrate Luka's notoriety. Lin's family arrived at Trudeau's airport on Montreal 2 days later, and a fund was established by the Chinese Students and Scholars Association of Concordia University to defray the expenses by Lin's family while they were in Canada, and an award was created in Lin's honor and a candlelight vigil held in Montreal. On July 11th, Lin's body was cremated and the ashes were buried on July 26th at the Notre Dame Cemetery in Montreal. Mark Merrick, who was the owner of the Best Score website, was charged by the Edmonton Police on July 16, 2013 with corrupting public morals, which is a rarely used obscenity charge for hosting the One Lunatic, One Ice Pick video. Mark changed his plea to guilty on January 25, 2016, and he would receive a 6-month conditional sentence. Mark had served half of his 6 months under house arrest. Luka would make an appearance in court via video link on June 19, 2012, and his lawyer said he pleaded not guilty to all charges. On March 11, 2013, the preliminary hearings began. The defense team of Luka's tried to request that the media and public be banned from the hearings. However, their request was denied. Traveling from China, Jun Lin's father, Jun Lin, attended the hearing. One of Luka's lawyers will resign on March 13th because of a possible conflict of interest. Expert witnesses who testified included a forensic pathologist, a forensic toxicologist, a forensic odontologist, a bloodstain analyst, and data recovery specialist, as well as an internet investigations officer. Video evidence was displayed by the prosecution, and during the proceedings, Luka and Lin physically collapsed at separate times. Luka was indicted on the following charges on April 12, 2013. First-degree murder, offering indignities to a human body, distributing obscene material, and using the Postal Service to distribute obscene material, and criminal harassment. Luka wanted to be tried by a judge and jury, and he pleaded not guilty. He admitted to the acts of the accused, but claimed diminished responsibility due to his mental disorder. On September 29, 2014, Crown Attorney Louis Maltmeyer made his opening statement. The trial lasted 10 weeks and was presided over by Quebec Superior Court Justice Guy Conroy. The jurors were instructed on opening day that Luka admits to the acts or condoning the underlying violence he in charge, and the jurors were tasked with determining whether the 5 charges were committed, with Luka being in the state of mind to commit each charge. Defense attorney Luc Leclerc argued that during the trial that Luka was in a psychotic state of mind at the time the crimes were committed and should not be held responsible for his own actions. It was argued by the Crown prosecutor that Jun Lin's murder was organized and premeditated. He argued that Luka was purposeful, mindful, ultra-organized, and ultimately responsible for his actions. When interviewed by a psychiatrist about the night he killed Lin, Luka told about a person who was an abusive client from an escort service who told him to kill, and that person's name was Manny. It was determined that the name Trammell that Luka used and the name Manny were aliases inspired by the Shannon Stone's fictional character Catherine Trammell and her fiancé Manny Vasquez, both from the movie Basic Instinct. It was also suggested by prosecutors that the screwdriver used to stab Lin was painted to silver to resemble the ice pick used in the movie's murder scene. The trial would last for 12 weeks, which includes 10 weeks of hearing testimony. Luka chose not to testify during the trial. The jury was made up of 8 women and 4 men, and their final instructions from the trial judge on December 15, 2014. They were sequestered before beginning their deliberations the next day. The jury would deliberate for 8 days and then return a verdict of guilty on all charges. Luka was given a mandatory life sentence with eligibility for parole after 25 years, and another 19 years was added for the other charges to be served concurrently. An appeal was filed by Luka wanting convictions to be annulled in a new trial. Luka's defense counsel filed the appeal with the Quebec Court of Appeals and cited a judicial error in the jury instructions. It was also further claimed in the appeal that the verdicts are unreasonable and unsupported by evidence and the instructions. On February 18, 2015, Luka withdrew his appeal. During Luka's trial for the murder defense, evidence was submitted that Luka had been diagnosed as a teenager with paranoid schizophrenia. Dr. Joel Watts, a defense expert, also testified that Luka showed signs of episodic schizophrenia, histrionic personality disorder, borderline personality traits, and paraphilia not otherwise specified. Luka had also been using illegal drugs during his teenage years that the prosecution would reveal. They claimed that using the drugs led to the symptoms mimicking schizophrenia. On April of 2012, Luka had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder by a Jewish General Hospital in Montreal by Crown expert Dr. Joel Paris, a forensic psychiatrist who had been treating Luka from November 2012 through the preliminary hearings up until the murder trial diagnosed Luka with borderline personality disorder with histrionic features. Another Crown expert, Dr. Giles Chamberlain, was not able to interview Luka, but suggested that Luka showed signs of antisocial, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorders. Luka was accused by the prosecution that he was pretending to be schizophrenic. His defense pleaded diminished responsibility due to alleged schizophrenia, and they noted over several years of psychiatrists found Luka to be antisocial, borderline histrionic, and narcissistic traits. Luka was transferred in August 2022 from a maximum security prison to a medium security prison. It had come to light just 2 years after the transfer took place. Luka Magnotta got what he wanted: attention, headlines, and a place in true crime history. But what he left behind was a devastation, grief, and permanent reminder of how easily cruelty can be amplified when the world is watching. This case isn't just a story about one man's crimes. It's about the dangers of glorifying violence, about the internet's role in spreading notoriety, and about how quickly a human life can be overshadowed by a killer's desire to be remembered. As always, we encourage you to remember the victims, not the spectacle. If you found this episode to be impactful, be sure to follow Bloodstained Backstories wherever you listen to your podcast, and share the episode with someone who wants to understand the darker truth behind the headlines. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and remember, some backstories are written in blood.